when we are triggered emotionally, that is something that our kids pick up on.
Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody. How is life? How's the new year? How was your Christmas or holidays, whatever you celebrated, or just winter break? We had such a different Christmas this year. As you know, I have 6 kids. 2 are living in, let me see if I can say it right, Chile. I always say Chile. And they're like, that's the restaurant. The country is pronounced Chile. Anyway, I have 2 sons. My 19 and 18-year-old are both living in Chile, and they did not come home for Christmas. So we only had 4 of the 6 kids here, and it was so different. Last year we went on a trip, which I loved. We didn't do any gifts, and that was perfect. But this year we decided to stay home. We were hoping for snow. We got a little dusting Christmas Eve, but it has been just brown. There's a song I listen to that I like called The Season of the Sticks. That's what it's felt like around here. And I'm not complaining. I really do love the seasons, even if we haven't had snow. But today it decided to snow. One of my New Year's resolutions, well, it actually started last year, but I'm continuing on with the resolution to walk 4 miles a day, which has been really easy with the weather being so good. But today when I woke up and I saw it was snowing, I got all my gear and I drove to the trail and I got my adorable sheepadoodle to come along with me, and we had the best time. Put on my boots for the first time. It was so fun. I love snow. I was raised in Phoenix, the Phoenix metro area, until we moved during COVID to the mountains, and I love the variety of seasons. So it kind of feels like Christmas today, which is really fun. And I just want to stay inside and drink hot chocolate and watch the snow fall. It's coming down hard. So fun. I love it. Well, today I'm doing something that I've done a few times before. I'm sharing an episode that was previously aired on a different podcast. This particular episode was on the Love Your Mom Life podcast with Nikki Odin. Nikki asked me to come on her show, which was such a privilege and an honor. We had a really great conversation, and I thought it would be a great episode to share with you guys. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with me and Nikki talking about parenting, talking about consequences and rewards and ultimatums and why they don't work and what to do about it.
Today's guest is a mom of 6, a reformed yeller, a best-selling author, and the creator of Connect Method Parenting, a breakthrough parenting framework that leverages connection as the primary mechanism for influencing children. Her approach helps parents discover why their kids don't listen and shows them the step-by-step process of regaining influence and building relationships that will last a lifetime. With hands-on experience raising her own children, ages 14 to 23, intensive coursework in development psychology, and years of experience in parenting coaching, today's guest has been able to help thousands of parents learn the parenting methodology that gets their kids to want to listen. Her goal is to help parents stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what their kids are doing, and build strong relationships through every phase and stage. Connect with her on her website, connectmethodparenting.com, on Facebook at Connect Method, or on Instagram at Andy Martineau. I'm super excited she's here today. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be talking to you about something I'm very passionate about, obviously parenting and how to help moms enjoy the whole process more. So thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
Always exciting to have someone come into our mom lives and tell us how to stop losing our tempers and screaming and basically pulling our hair out, trying to get our kids to listen, because I personally find that one of the most infuriating parts of parenting. It's like, sometimes I say to my son, I'm like, look at my eyeballs. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Because he's not listening. And I get so angry. So I'm really excited to dive into how we break this down. Like, why does that not work? Why are they not listening in the first place? And how do I get them to start? So let's talk first about how you became a reformed yeller, because obviously you used to be just like the rest of us and yell. What led you down this path to really learning how to get to the crux of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really was my failure that led to the turning and realizing this has got to change. And there was this moment, I call it the Great Baby Powder Blizzard of 2007, where for some reason, my kids thought it would be this great idea to get the Costco-sized bottle of baby powder and douse this room. And I started losing it, as I found them in the midst of this chaos. And for whatever reason, and it was nothing I had done prior to that time to allow me to have this awareness, but I went from irate, yelling, losing my temper, all of the things that we just typically do because it's just too much sometimes, or we're tired, exhausted, and we just can't handle what's happening.
Yeah.
I did all of that. But midstream, my 3-year-old, who was the instigator of the entire thing, went from beaming because he thought it was this beautiful masterpiece to completely crushed. And that was the miracle moment for me, that I saw that and was able to pivot. And I know we all have those moments in our life where it's midstream almost for no good reason. We don't know why, but we're able to get off that frustrated train and move into more compassion and peace. And that's what happened at this moment. And we cleaned it up quickly. Actually, I really thought it was going to be an all-day event. But, switching my energy to compassion and realizing, this was something that they weren't trying to make my life miserable, which is the case with our kids, right? They're not trying to make our life hard, even though it feels like it. Allowed the process and everything that had to happen afterwards to happen seamlessly. And it was after that event that I became very determined because of my pattern and because of what had just happened. I thought, I've got to figure this out because that felt so much better. And it wasn't that was surprising to me. I mean, obviously it feels better when we don't yell.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, I'm going to reverse engineer this. How did I get to that place? And then what's the science and psychology that supports that? I was a nurse. That's what my degree was in initially. And so I liked the science. I wanted the data because the hesitation for me, and I don't know if you can relate, Nikki, the hesitation was if I'm not really, really teaching them the lesson and giving them the consequence and letting them know that was not okay, they're never going to learn. And even though in the Baby Powder Blizzard event, I didn't do any of those things. I started with the anger and then dropped into just complete surrender and acceptance. There were no consequences given. They didn't need to know that was not okay. They knew that it wasn't okay.
Right.
And everything just shifted without what I thought was necessary for long-term success. And it was interesting because innately I knew the consequences weren't really working, because if they were, the behavior wouldn't keep repeating and I wouldn't keep losing my mind every day when I did it. Like it's not working on any level. So that really led me at the time, just for my own sanity, because I ended up having 6 kids in 8 years. At this time I had 5 and my last 2 are a year and 5 days apart. So that's, that was not planned. I mean, it's beautiful now, but I had number 5 at the time, was pregnant with, or shortly thereafter, pregnant with number 6. So it was like a do or die moment for me.
Yeah.
So I started just diving into developmental psychology, learned about attachment theory, and started stripping away some of the beliefs I had inherited from society, that the way to get kids to listen was consequences. I've totally redefined what that is. I think they do need limits. I'm not saying let's go passive here, because that's not. The research doesn't support either like this authoritative parenting or passive parenting. They both yield negative result. But it was, how can I get to that middle ground? And that's how it all began. It was really the process of failure that led to success, which I think is, it's just something I think all of us in our life can agree that typically is some of our biggest failures do lead to some of our greatest wins in our life.
I was just going to say,
that's the story.
It is so true that from those fall on your face moments, we often rise up because we need to. And it is a choice, certainly. So credit.
Well, I had plenty that I didn't, right?
Right.
Plenty that didn't.
At some point you realize you hit like the low and you're like, something's got to give. Whatever I'm doing right now is not working. And how do I figure out what will work? And I love stories like that, because you could have chosen to keep on screaming and continue to be frustrated, and everybody would suffer for it to this day.
Yeah.
Or you could choose to reflect on what's actually going to work. How do I fix this? What can I do? Like, we have to turn into ourselves sometimes and figure out how we can be part of the solution. And now you're part of the solution for so many other parents. So
let's
talk about that. Like how do we stop yelling?
Yes. Okay. So first step is what we just talked about is not beating yourself up for your failures. Sometimes we just forget that accepting ourselves for where we are allows our nervous system to relax so that we can actually learn from the event instead of just continue the cycle of beating ourselves up. I know not every mom is as critically hard on themselves as I was, but I have sure talked to a lot. It seems like the majority of moms feel so much pressure, weight, responsibility to not mess this up, guilt, that cycle just keeps spinning. And so one of the reasons I lead with I'm a reformed yeller is I want to say, like, it's okay to be vulnerable about our mistakes and they can lead to something completely different. And so vulnerability and acceptance of exactly where you are, and that it makes perfect sense why some of us yell or use consequences or even, freeze or go passive, whatever your go-to is, that's not beneficial really to solve the problem. It makes sense at some level to our nervous system that is a response that would be helpful, even though it's really not creating the results we want. So that's the first step in becoming a transformed yeller or a transformed frustrated mom or whatever your level is of negative emotions that you're displaying that you don't like, is just accept that it's okay where you are. Like nothing's gone wrong. There's just something to learn and understand here. The second step I would say though is really going a step further with the nervous system and realizing that when we are triggered emotionally, that is something that our kids pick up on. Mm-hmm. And it affects us. So when we're triggered emotionally and we go into fight, flight, freeze, whatever, and that might look like yelling, storming out of the room, blaming, all of those things that we could have an expansive list. But I think everyone gets the idea. When we go into that state, that the emotions are elevated and the thinking is diminished, and so we really are, it's primitive. People call it lizard brain, you go Neanderthal, lots of different terms for it. But the essence is the prefrontal cortex just isn't as accessible. And we want that accessible, especially in those tricky situations. So understanding the dynamics and just how the nervous system functions and how we really, truly, when we become elevated emotionally, aren't going to show up the best we want for our kids. That awareness is really important. Yeah. The other thing it does is it sends signals to our kids, and their mirror neurons, which I love that science has found this for us. They have these mirror neurons that are picking up on the signals and the emotional, frequency, for lack of a better word, that we're sending out, kind of like radio waves, and they're picking up on that. And as a result, they are mirroring us, and they're saying, well, if mom's in fight or flight, if she's really triggered, I better protect myself. So they go into fight or flight, and then we're just two nervous systems butting heads, and we aren't able to make positive change or progress. So understanding just almost mechanically what's happening in the background, and that it's not you. This is just your nervous system that's decided to have a response. Their nervous system is having a response. That's all that's happening, can really neutralize the situation so that we can look at it without all of the judgments and resistance. So those are the first two things. I don't know if you have any comments or questions, but that's where I would start. And then I have so much more I could say about it, but.
Yeah, I do. I think that it is so important to take that pause and to really say, there's nothing wrong with me. There's just something to learn and understand here. I love that perspective. And I say that all the time about quote unquote negative emotions, right? Like when I'm angry or frustrated, or I feel like I'm not a great mom. It's okay to feel that way. That's telling me something. It's giving me information. What's not okay is for me to dwell in it and to keep repeating it over and over to myself until it becomes a story I believe. That's not okay. But having the feeling is okay. And then just to tell yourself, look, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm reacting to something that there's something to learn and understand here. And then realizing that we do have these nervous systems that have been in place for thousands of years. And although our environments have changed and our triggers have changed, our responses haven't always been all that different because we're trying to protect ourselves or trying to keep things status quo or whatever the case may be. And when we come at our kids like that, we're putting them in the same state. So it's just a fascinating thing to remember. I think the struggle I have sometimes is like being able to call on that knowledge and that awareness in the moment.
Yeah, that is the struggle because it's so easy, or I should say it's much easier to have the awareness after the fact.
Yes.
To look back on the event and say, I was tired. I was stressed about this, situation that had happened outside of parenting and that, caused me to come in activated, or my child was just tired or stressed or whatever,
Right.
and have that beautiful perspective after the fact. And it does take, for lack of a better word, training, diligence to create the new neural pathways,
Yes.
to retrain our brain to be able to, in the moment, access that knowledge, that truth, really. And to remember, I love the fact that you said nothing's wrong with me and nothing's wrong with my child.
Right.
Like they totally make sense too, right? But when we can come into the situation, like that's magic. The key is to start to direct the brain towards the truth of those statements outside of the event. And I think this is where sometimes we don't realize the importance of this. And like you said, our brains have historically been programmed to look for the problem and to protect itself. So we really have to reprogram the brain and create a new neural pathway that's in alignment with who we want to be. And so doing that ahead of the time is critical. Just, if you were going to run a marathon, you wouldn't just show up for it and then be so confused why you weren't able to run the whole thing. If you didn't do the training regiment, you won't be prepared. And we know that, in other ways with physical, people make fitness plans, we make meal plans, all of these things, but we really do need to make a connection plan, a response plan, I call it, and a plan to look inside my brain and see, why did I act that way yesterday? And let me have further understanding. And then from that awareness, start to create habits, patterns, practices outside of the event that allow us to eventually, the gap might be really big at the beginning and we're just trying to see, when am I going to hit it when I hit it in real time? And the beautiful thing with that event I was telling you about, the baby powder blizzard, was for whatever reason, magically, and sometimes this happens, it just happens in real time and we're kind of shocked. We're like, wow, that was really amazing that I was able to snap out of it. And when we have those events, to celebrate them too, that's part of the process. Is I did it today and it's not a fluke, and don't discount it as luck. It's like, there was something that changed there. Let me just figure out how to do that again. What is the belief that I want to have as a truth in my mind that I can bring that really resonates? Because every parent I work with, it's slightly different. For some parents, they can totally get around, nothing's gone wrong. And so other parents are like, nope, my brain, it doesn't believe that at all. So then we go somewhere else, we're like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to be the same as someone else's. What's going to allow you to have neutrality, to believe nothing's gone wrong, to believe that the behavior is just information of something going on internally, and to really believe that emotions are normal. They're part of human life, and they take time when we get triggered to come down. And even though for our kid, it might be the cookie we said no to before dinner, and we think that's completely ridiculous. And we're like, that's way out of proportion. We have our own version of the cookie that's completely ridiculous.
Right.
That's totally out of proportion. And so we do that training ahead of time. We start to make those new neural pathways by strengthening beliefs that we want to have in the moment.
I love that idea of having a connection plan. That is such a beautiful way to look at it. And I love the intentionality of being deliberate because it's going to happen. So I have a plan for when it does. Like, I'm training myself to respond to this inevitable event. There's always going to be something with our kids. And at every phase and stage, as you said, it's new for us. So I know now how I would react to a 3-year-old, but I have an 11-year-old and I don't know how I'd react to a 12 or 13-year-old. So
yes,
it's like a constant thing. And to be able to practice and train and be exercising that muscle, I think is huge. And it's not something most of us think about.
No, it's so interesting. When it started to dawn on me, it was both completely obvious. And I thought, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. Why didn't I think of this before? And it wasn't on the radar at all before that. And what I really understand is there's really just 3 things that we need to do to get us to a place where we stop having, as I'll never say we never yell. I mean, there might be something, right? And I never want us to beat ourselves up for slipping. We can recover quickly and we can do it less often, and to almost to the point where it's like, oh, it doesn't hardly happen. But to get us to this place where we can be, I say, calm, confident, connected, and confident that even if things go a little bit off, I can bring them back. Connected that even if the behavior's off track, I can show up for them and let them know I love you regardless of your behavior, and that behavior is still not okay. I can have confidence in those skills that I'm building. So the 3 things that I want to make sure I say these, because I think they're really important, is that understanding of what's going on in my brain. Like, if we're not being that observer, that watcher of our brain, especially when something's gone off the rails and we did maybe perform in a way we're like, that wasn't my best moment. Coming with so much kindness and compassion towards ourselves and saying, okay, what were the dynamics? What was I thinking? How was I feeling? What did that create for myself? Okay, I get it. All right, now what do I want to do differently next time? Having a practice of, it can look like journaling. It can just look like some of my moms just sit and just they'll think about it. They'll listen to some really calming music after, getting themselves in a really good place to be able to review with kindness and really just, I did the best I could. It wasn't what I want, but in that moment, that was the best I could muster. Let me understand why. So understand our own behavior, our own emotions, our actions, the results we're creating with kindness and compassion. So that's the first thing that we have to do because we are the parent. We are the ones showing up and setting the tone for the home. It's not our kids' responsibility. Absolutely. It really is our responsibility. Yes. So we have to be doing that. And that's, to me, that's the same as like taking your multivitamin, right? It's not going to be the thing that's going to solve something. If you have pneumonia, you need to go to the doctor and get the antibiotics. But it is the thing that will hopefully help you stay as healthy as humanly possible. So no matter what happens, you're going to be in the best shape possible. You're giving yourself the best chance for success. Or if in the marathon analogy, it would be like doing the training, eating the right foods to prepare you. And then the second thing is that connection plan is creating an intentional plan to really show up for our kids, not half distracted. I say like, it's great to be in the same room with them. It's great to take them to all of their activities, but are we really thinking, okay, what does this child need? What are they struggling with? Do they need more of me? Do they need some help with school? Do they need, like, how can I just be present with them, both physically, emotionally, just be thinking about them in a way that they can hopefully, but I know I'm feeling true care and genuine connection with them. And so there's lots of ways to do that, but creating that in a way, how am I when they wake up? How am I when they get back from school? What am I like when they're going to bed? And thinking about what they need. The last one is the response plan. It's choosing to stay close when things are completely off track and we normally would feel maybe slightly disconnected or want to pull away from them or have judgment, blame, or resistance. Really having steps in place. And this is where that bridge starts to shorten is when we can think about, okay, for me, I have these 3 problem areas. Maybe it's bedtime, mealtime, and after they come home from school. Those are just like seem to be, like a little bit triggery times for everyone. We're all on edge. The witching hours. Or sometimes when they come back from school, they're just exhausted and they're just not, they've been holding in all their emotions, or maybe somebody said something unkind and they're going to come home and let that out. And we're going to maybe feel that a little bit more. And I need to be prepared and really thinking, okay, these are my times where I want to show up a little bit better. I haven't been showing up the best I can. And I also am going to prepare myself that these might be really, like the kids might say or do things that might be really tricky for me to hear. And so what am I going to do? And we almost create, and I would recommend this for everybody. I used to do it with 3x5 cards because I'm old enough where I didn't have a smartphone back in the day when my kids were little. So you can do it on a smartphone too, but have something where you literally almost have like that choose your own adventure kind of multi,
like if this, then this
scenario. Yes, that. And you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to be thinking when the kids come home from school. And this is how I'm going to be feeling. This is how I want to show up, get really intentional about that creation of it. And then depending on what happens, here's different ways I would respond if maybe they always resist doing homework. And so that's triggery for me because I'm thinking, why can't they just do it? It's not that hard. And so I'm thinking, okay, when they say, because they're totally going to say that they don't want to do homework, here's how I'm going to show up. And here's how I want to be thinking and feeling about them to create, just this connection and still set this firm limit. And so you start to really role play that in your head, and then you go try to do it and you're trying to totally mess up and that's completely fine. And you just go back and review, okay, it didn't work because of this, and that's fine. And maybe my card that I wrote out didn't exactly work because I now see this, thing I missed. And,
right.
And you just eventually will get closer to being able to create exactly what you want in the moment. So those are my 3 prongs. And I could go into all of that even more, but I think that was a good overview about just how we get to this place where we show up more consistently as that calm, connected, confident mom. We want to be for our kids so that they want to call us when they move out. They want to talk to us. They're not like just doing it because they want money or something.
If you're new to Connect Method Parenting, I have a great way for you to get started. I created a free course that covers some of the biggest challenges parents are facing and how Connect Method Parenting solves them. In an hour, we're going to talk about why parenting is so hard, how to get your kids to want to listen to you, how to stop yelling and losing your cool, and become that calm, confident, connected parent for good. It's the fastest way to get started using connection as your go-to tool for influencing and impacting your kids. Go to cmp.works/course to get instant access today.
And I think that it just goes back to what you said before about it being training and practice. And we don't always do it perfectly. First of all, we're never going to do it perfectly, but we're not going to always do a great job with it. So again, it's like a big cycle. I have the plan, the connection plan, I have the response plan, and then it doesn't go the way I had intended it to, then go back to reflecting like there's nothing wrong with me. This is just information, something I need to learn here. And then we tweak it and keep going. And I love the idea of that because that is really the human experience. It's progress. It's continuing to just move forward and get better and take the information that we have, learn from it, and try something new the next time and just stay present with it.
Yeah, I think Nelson Mandela, I'm probably going to misquote it, but this is my memory of his quote. He said something like, I never fail. I only learn or grow. That's the essence of it. And I love that idea of we only fail if we're not learning from it, if we're not progressing from it, if we're not growing from it. And if we're learning and growing and progressing from it, we're not failing. That's not even a failure. We can't even count that as a failure. Exactly. And so that is the human experience. And I think when we can see there is just really three things I need to be doing. I need to be understanding and reflecting. I need to be having a connection plan to strengthen the relationship. So when things are struggling, the kids know I'm still on their team, even though I have to set that limit. And I'm really being intentional about setting what I call connective limits as needed, being firm and compassionate simultaneously. Those are the only things we need to do. And if we're doing those three things, success is inevitable. And sometimes it feels daunting, overwhelming. If it feels like we might be at an impasse with our kids about a behavior or a situation just doesn't go away. But what I'll say to everyone listening, if you're just zero in on those three things I talked about, it's inevitable. It's the same as training for a marathon. If you do the regiment of someone who knows what they're talking about, even though it might seem impossible to run the marathon today, you will be able to run the marathon if you follow the training and the eating plan and all the plans. So yeah, it's doable for everyone. I'm trying to say it's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah.
And it's something anyone who's committed to the process can do.
So before we wrap up, I do have a question about consequences, bribes, ultimatums. I tend to be an ultimatum person, and I've heard over and over again they don't work, but that's where I go. And I don't start there. I definitely don't start there. But like if I'm not getting through, I feel like I got to threaten this kid. I don't know what else to do. So, but why doesn't that work?
Yeah, it doesn't work for a lot of reasons. One of the primary things is the kids. Ultimately, all of us have our agency, and especially the older, yours are getting a little bit older, and they can start to call your bluff later. Like, you're saying this, but are you really going to follow through? Or if they just really don't agree with what we're saying, a lot of times they just can find the loophole, or they can just push through. Our ability to control them, even with an ultimatum, it's sometimes limited. The other thing is it's very disconnecting.
Yeah.
So our kids are programmed to, and this is all of us as children are programmed to know that we need an attachment with an adult to take care of us so we can survive. And that desire for them to connect with us and us honoring that attachment and really nurturing it is the thing that creates impact and influence. And when we give a punitive consequence, which even though consequences don't have to be punitive, but typically in parenting, they're punitive consequences. They're not connective. They're to teach them a lesson. Anytime we do a punitive consequence, if we're doing the bribes, even though those are rewards might be a nicer version of that same thing, it's still saying, hey, I'm breaching our trust and our agreement of connection. And so we're actually sabotaging ourselves as parents, because the thing that will create the most impact and influence as a parent, that will distill our values, that will help our kids have that intrinsic motivation to do what's best for them ultimately. It is them being able to want to listen to us, like opting in to listen to us. And even though they're not going to agree with everything we say and they're not going to be perfect because they need their agency, their freedom, they're going to like sow their oats. That's what we want. And so ultimatums, bribes, and punitive consequences, they truly eat away at that connection, that attachment, that relationship, which therefore creates less impact and influence, which therefore they're ineffective.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so I like to say that consequences, and I usually say connective limits, because I like to use a different word so that our brains does instantly just go to what consequences typically have meant for us, is that consequences that are done in a connective way or a connective limit, they are important and they set boundaries. They create safety. You know,
Right.
if they are needed, we need parameters in our life. Our children need to have us help them create a safe place for them because they don't understand some of the rules of the game here on earth when they first get here.
Yeah.
So they're important. But what they don't do is they don't create intrinsic motivation to follow forever and ever. They don't actually, in and of themselves, create understanding of why that was important for us to have that limit. They don't create that inherent safety in the relationship. They might create physical safety. Like if a toddler is running into the street, we're creating physical safety, but they're not creating the relational safety that is really critical and crucial as they grow up. So that's in a nutshell, I would say. A good thing to take away is just that consequences aren't going to teach that lesson that you're ultimately thinking they're going to teach. They're not going to change behavior because they're just getting in the way of that relationship, which is maybe making them even more resistant to what suggestions you might have for them to do. You know, it's a good idea to pick up your room. And even if they want to pick up their room, all of a sudden, if the relationship is off, they're like, I can't even pick up my room because mom wants me to. And I got to show her, right, and this is all subconscious, but this tug of war ensues that many of us have.
It creates resistance. That's so interesting, which is the exact opposite of what you want it to do. You do want to change behavior through the consequences and the ultimatums and the bribes.
You do. And it just
it's
doesn't
not gonna
work. The cool thing is science. There's so many studies people can look up now to really show it just doesn't work. If it did, you know, we wouldn't have prisons, people like recurring going back in prison, or we wouldn't have bad behavior in our home because we're all experts at giving consequences. And if they actually taught the lesson and changed behavior, you know, it wouldn't be a problem anymore. They would just get it and stop doing it. So relationships really are at the base of parenting. And a lot of us think discipline or managing behavior is the essence of parenting, but really the essence of parenting is creating an environment where your kids can thrive, where they feel seen and heard, and where they can choose to listen to you. And if they don't choose to listen to you, they're not in a punitive punishment state. There might be restrictions put on them for their safety and for their own good, but they can feel that safety and trust and thrive. And that's a big shift. And that was the biggest hesitation I had for myself at first was, is this going to work, or are my kids just going to run wild?
Right.
Because I really thought if I drop the consequences, I don't have any other tools. Like that's my tool, you know, that's going to teach them a lesson. And really having experimenting with, connection actually has more power and influence than this. And I can learn to set a connective limit and be compassionate and firm at the same time. That's a skill that I would love every parent to be able to feel confident in doing. It's a passion. It's like, I want that for every parent to understand what that feels like, because for a lot of us, we don't have experience. We haven't seen it. It's not modeled very many places, and we haven't practiced it. And so, but once you do, you're going to be hooked. Just that. And everyone's probably tasted it, you know, this is what it tastes like, but to be able to reproduce it on demand is just beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes. And the work you're doing is beautiful. So for those of you listening, if you want more of Andy, you have a podcast. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about that and where people can find you.
Yeah, I just started it fairly recently. So you can find it all the places podcasts are. It's called Connect Method Parenting. I tried to keep it simple. So the website's that, the modality of parenting is that, the podcast is that. And really the purpose of the podcast is just to teach what we've been talking about here, is just let's get this out. I want to just make this the mainstay of the parenting dialogue going on. So yeah, they can find me there. And then I do have a free course. If someone's like, yes, I like what you said, they can just go to my website. You'll see it in right at the top. They can take a free course that takes you through just some really great steps to get you started, to start that process for you.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes so it's an easy one click for everyone listening.
Love it.
Andy, thank you so much for being here. This was a fascinating conversation, and I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me on and giving me a chance to share it with more people. So I appreciate that so much.
We need to hear it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.